relevant and to make the messages timely. This morning, the providence of God in preaching has really been brought home to me. We are continuing an ongoing series on the Sermon on the Mount entitled Life After Calvary. And I'll remind you of why we're calling it that. The Sermon on the Mount is geared primarily for disciples. It is primarily for the saved. This is what life is to be for us after we've come to Jesus, after we've gone to the cross for salvation. This is what's to be in us. This is how we are to live. This is how we are to approach life. And as I shared with you just a minute ago, I believe in the providence of God in preaching. It's been brought home to me this week because we're dealing with the last of the Beatitudes, Matthew 5, verses 10 to 12. These three verses that encapsulate the last Beatitude have to do with persecution, have to do with facing opposition for the gospel of Jesus Christ. As I'm going to talk about in my sermon, in light of events in Texas last Sunday, I know of no more timely message than to speak about persecution, than to speak about opposition to the gospel. Let's look at these verses together. Now, let me give you a little bit of context, a little bit about what's going on and how important verses 10 to 12 are on persecution. I want you to note what they follow. The Beatitude dealing with persecution follows Matthew 5, verse 9, which deals with peacemaking. As a disciple of the Lord Jesus Christ, you and I are to be dedicated to the proposition of peace. How do we make peace? Well, one of the ways that we make peace is to share the gospel with a lost and dark world. We share the light of the world, Jesus Christ. When we share the gospel and people believe, vertical peace is established. Peace between sinful man and holy God. We're to be peacemakers in that way. We're to be peacemakers in our horizontal relationships. We are to pursue peace by forgiving folks that wrong us, and in turn seeking forgiveness when we wrong people. We are dedicated to the proposition of peace. We try, as Paul says in Romans 12, inasmuch as lies with us, to be at peace with all men. But how will the world respond to our overtures of peace? How will the world respond to us when we try to live in peace? Jesus gives us the answer in verses 10 to 12. Though we pursue peace, though we strive for it, the world is not going to be at peace with us. If you take your relationship with Jesus Christ seriously, you are going to face opposition. You are going to face persecution. As I read verses 10 to 12, I want you to note something else. This is the only beatitude that is doubly emphasized. Most of the beatitudes consist of one verse. Blessed are, fill in the blank. In this beatitude dealing with persecution, Jesus makes this statement, blessed are the persecuted, twice in verses 10 and 11. Why does he do that? For emphasis. He wants you to know that when you face persecution for the cause of Jesus Christ, when you face opposition, it's not because God is angry with you. You are approved of God if you're a disciple of Christ. He loves you. He cares for you. This persecution, it comes because God does approve you. Now, I need to stop and read the text or I'll just start preaching. So let me read this text and then I'll turn it back over to you, Brother Terry. Jesus says in Matthew 5, verses 10 to 12, on this timely subject of persecution, blessed are those who have been persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you and persecute you and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward in heaven is great. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. May God add his blessing to his word.